ein bisschen hier noch rein. Und sonst sieht es gut aus. What is up? Wir sind in Hongkong. Das wird ein busy week sein. We'll take it along the ride. Let's go. I was surprised that it's so warm. It's very much like Florida weather. It's like very humid. The first thing I noticed too is that Hong Kong used to be like controlled by the British, and so all the traffic here is also like the British. It's the opposite direction, so I almost got driven over a couple of times so far.
Hong Kong. I remember I was here in 04, but a lot has happened since. You know, one day you're the 9-year-old wandering around with no war in the world. The next you find yourself as an adult, engulfed in what may become the biggest financial war in history. I started my first fund thinking that all I would do is trade this new asset class that was exciting, but no one really took serious. Yet the last 6 months have been a wake-up call that this is the end game. Markets crashing, FTX, governmental crackdown, and the United States is broken under its own corruption. Our very leaders were arm in arm with SBF, and now they're trying to kill this industry. But look, crypto's bigger than the United States, and that's why we are here. I'm not gonna let my team down, and I'm gonna let my investors down. No matter how much the world wants to break this industry, I'll do what it takes to be one of the few standing when the battle ends. So, if we want to win, we need to spread this idea wider and faster. It's even risky to say all this. They might try to come after me too. But at the end of the day, an idea is bigger than a man.
So how did you actually choose those companies?
Ideally, they operate in a blue ocean where there's already real-world traction and the founders are badass, ideally. One great one, for example, is StressX. You know, I don't know if you know them. They're like the #1 digital fashion startup in the world right now. 2 incredible female founders, for example. You know, I liked it because in mid-2021, my girlfriend at the time, she didn't like crypto, she didn't like NFTs, but she was scrolling through this app, and I'm like, oh, what is that? It's like, oh, it's digital fashion. I took a close look. I'm like, you know that those are NFTs? She's like, oh, no, it's just digital fashion. I'm like, no, those are, it says like Flow blockchain, right? And so I was like, wow, there's a real use case here where there's an audience that uses NFTs without knowing that they are NFTs. So there's real use case there. And the company itself, StressX, like they make great revenue. It's not about speculation, about utility. Well, the question is, are we any different?
Yeah, because we are inventors.
Are we inventors or do we just try things out? And then we're like, oh, this worked, you know? We're dropped off on this earth as little blobs of flesh, like little humans with like 2 eyes, and like we observe things, we touch things, and then like, you know, we figure out how things, we observe people, right? Like, oh, parents walk on legs, we try it out, we fall a couple of times, and then okay, this is how balance works, right? Language, same thing. You drop a child off in a certain country, they learn the language by listening and whatnot, right?
But there is still a moment of insight, I think. Do some repetitive thing for a long time, try and see the result.
Actually, there is a evolutionary AI. Like I looked at that like years ago, where there's a website, for example, I don't know if anyone wants, where essentially they instructed the AI to come up with like the best version of a vehicle. And it started with like a line, and it realized, okay, the line doesn't work. And then it started iterating until it pretty much invented a car. Essentially, like you keep making like an infinite amount of like different like pathways until you get the best outcome. And unlike humans, you know, the AI can test things much faster than we can. I wouldn't say that we're that much better that we can invent things and AI can't. Do you have Wi-Fi? Hey Angela, how you doing? In 2012, as I was graduating high school, I was working a minimum wage job in a warehouse, and I was, you know, stocking shelves, and I was thinking, this is weird, you know. I graduated 4th in my class. I, you know, had an 800 on SAT math. I was a smart kid, you know, Mensa and everything, but somehow I was working a minimum wage job. And I thought, you know, well, what skills do I have? What can I do where I can use my passion for the future too? And I've realized that investing and trading is like the perfect profession for that, because I can envision where the future is going and then invest in the good and fight for the bad. And that has kind of become my whole mission in life. Now I'm really feeling that jet lag. It's time for bed. What is up? It's a new day. It's Wednesday now already. Heading to the office of one of our limited partners, a fund of funds out of Hong Kong actually. They already invested in the Metaverse Fund, and so I'm gonna A, see them, and you know, B, try to get them to add a little bit, you know, get them to grow with us. They managed $2 billion.
give me a couple million.
Funny because so I oftentimes tell on podcasts how we had a lot of verbal commitments. We had that big investor that I always mentioned that like gave us a $10 million verbal commitment that got cold feet. And then I had like another $2 million of verbal commitments from people, including him. But with him, it wasn't just verbal. He actually had documents signed. But then when it came time to close the investment, to actually wire and get everything done, he just kind of disappeared. And I don't hold it against him, which is fine because we're closed now. He's an LP now. But it was funny because, again, he was one of the first to ever sign it. And then it fell through. But of course, we still launched. And years later, I would say 3 years later or so, he finally came through. It was great to see that. Sometimes it still takes patience, and you always have to be mature. That's a big thing too. People tell you yes, and then it doesn't work, and you just keep pushing along, and they'll come through eventually.
Alrighty, it will be an intimate session today. I know it was like last minute, although it's regular time, but I figured since last week I was in New York and this week I'm in Hong Kong, I still want to stick with it, even though it's 2 a.m. in the morning. So we're recording, we're live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Welcome back to Crypto Trader Life, a weekly cryptocurrency session where we talk about the crypto market, see what's been going on over the past 7 days, see how the market did, see how we did, and get ready for what's to come so we can maximize our profits and limit our risk. Last 7 days until this
Gives me big Batman vibes here right now. The gray air, the world needs dark night. So we're heading to the YPO events, the Young President Organization. To be in YPO, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it's something to the tune of like you have to make like 5 million profit a year. You have to have like a company with a couple hundred employees and stuff like that. So it's going to be a very nuanced crowd versus the more the general public. So it's going to be good. The event starts at 6 p.m. It is now 5:45, and the Uber is still 5 minutes away. So we're in the usual Felix manner. We're right on time. Let's put it this way. It's just not moving. Let me call a Lyft as well, if they exist here. Fuck. 7-0.
Thank you very much, everybody, for coming and joining us. I was so thrilled to hear that Felix will be in town. We know each other for over a year.
Yeah.
And only met in the metaverse. So he came into town. I called up Thomas, and I know it's super last minute, but we have to take the opportunity to, have everybody come and join and listen to Felix. I put a lot of pressure on Felix and said, the YPO crowd really is looking for insights they cannot get anywhere else. And you can share without any worries of reassurance that this will not leave the room. So I just want to remind everybody that this event runs under forum confidentiality rules.
One of our founders has a really great line that I love, and he says, reality is the new luxury. If you live in a city like, Miami, New York, LA, Hong Kong, right? There's plenty of things to do. Major festivals, nightlife, and so forth. But in most places in the world, it is really, really boring. Not everybody is going to go in their lifetime to Coachella, because Coachella tickets are like, $600, $1,000, and then you fly in, you have to get a hotel. It's just not a reality for most people. But if all of a sudden you have these fully immersive virtual concerts, for example, where for micropayments you can attend, and then an artist cannot just perform in front of 1,000 people or 10,000 people, but in front of 5 million people across thousands of shards, that becomes scalable. And then take it a step further, what if they don't even have to perform live? What if it's an AI rendition of them performing live around the clock 24/7? And what if they can perform posthumously, where you can still attend a Nirvana concert, where you can still attend, a Bob Marley concert, and so forth, right? That too is becoming a reality with, VR and AI intertwining. If your kids are using ChatGPT to complete their high school or college papers, more power to them, because honestly, in the real world, they will not need to write papers anymore. Well, at least the boss, or if ideally they are the boss, it's not about how you complete, it's about that you completed. In middle school, calculators were still not allowed, right? Of course, calculators existed, but can't use a calculator, that's cheating. In the real world, does anybody care how you arrive at the right answer? And so I think it's very similar with AI tools. You might say, no, you should still do it yourself. I would rather say, master the skill of how to use these tools. Get the best at using a calculator, get the best at using prompts, right? Learn to ask the right question, learn to train your AI properly. That's a very valuable skill to master. Let them cheat with AI on their homework, because I think it's ridiculous that there's some schools that actually forbid ChatGPT when that is the one skill that will set them apart in the marketplace later.
Join me in giving you Thank you so much. And I think we do have a little token of appreciation.
All right.
There's the
It was fun. I mean, I was in flow state there, I would say, a little bit. They're like checking me out. Like, who's the man with the camera? You wish you knew.
How's it going?
How are you?
You're raising another fund?
I guess technically we got 3 funds now. Yeah, we got the Crypto Hedge Fund, the Metaverse VC, and we're launching. It's like a fund of funds, essentially. I invest in all funds, and I invested in every PDF back in 2016.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
OG.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So you're based in Miami.
Yeah. Now it is time for bed because I'm feeling dead as fuck. But back at the hotel, I'm probably gonna give some instructions over to the team. For us, it's bedtime. For them, they're just getting started. Like the whole day is literally getting started. We just missed our morning stand-up meeting because there's a 12-hour time difference. So I gotta give some instructions to the team. Gotta give some documents over to my lawyers for them to review, so that the process moves along. We're heading to the Animoca Brands office right now, where we're meeting with the capital team and their venture team. Animoca is probably one of the biggest metaverse and gaming allocators, particularly out of Hong Kong. I think last time they raised, they were roughly like a $6 billion valuation. Chatting with them and seeing, perhaps there is an opportunity for us to collaborate from the angle that, we could be a scout fund. We're an early stage fund that finds pre-seed, seed stage opportunities. And because they're bigger, they oftentimes come in at, the Series A and so forth. And so it could be a dynamic where we find early stage projects, send them off to them, they back on later, and so it's a win-win. A mini fun fact is that their biggest investment is the one where we're the biggest short seller last year.
Which one?
Sandbox, or I talked about that on like podcast, how I think Sandbox is garbage. How we were shorting it, and they own like 20% of the entire project.
Wow.
Yeah. The way to build a network is really, I always look at it like as nodes in a network, right? That's the word networking, right? And then with crypto, you have nodes where you are one dot, right? And then you meet one person and they're another dot, right? Now, if you provide enough value to that other dot, right? They might say, hey, you should meet this person or this person or this person, right? And then guess what? Then you meet this person and all of a sudden it's no longer this, but rather now it's a direct connection. And now you also have this person in your network. And the same thing goes again. Do you provide enough value to this person where they say, hey, you know what? Actually, I know these 5 people. And then they introduce you. Networking doesn't happen, randomly. It happens by, meeting the right people, flooding them with opportunity, flooding them with value, and just like showing that you're also you're a good person. And then, doors open. For me, it started with, people I knew from way back when in high school. Then they introduced me to somebody, and then that person introduced me to someone else, and then that person became an investor. And that investor, I've done well for over the last 4 years. And she introduced me to somebody that hosts one of the big Hong Kong tech conferences. And so I spoke at that tech conference, and I built a relationship with her. And then I said, hey, I'm coming to Hong Kong. Who should I meet? And so then she introduced me to, for example, like Animoca and the YPO event, here in Hong Kong. And so, one opportunity leads to another opportunity. I think ideally, we'll be managing over $1 trillion 50 years from now, and we'll be the leading name in anything technology, where we have our finger on the pulse for, AI, VR, live extension, crypto, space, everything, Support technology from every stage of the way, from the pre-seed accelerator all the way to publicly traded companies. And yeah, that's something I'd love.
Felix Hartmann, one of our great partners. I think just got awarded, right, for...
Yes, we were both like the #1 performing crypto fund for H2 of last year, and then for the Metaverse Fund, we won the American Metaverse Awards for Best VC in Metaverse.
Wow, amazing.
The way I want to start this talk off is, I think we find ourselves in a really, really interesting time right now with digital assets, where the feeling that I would say most innovators have in this current space is not necessarily excitement, but disillusionment. Where last year we had a year where you had FTX collapse, major fraud happened on every single corner, from FTX to Celsius to BlockFi, Three Arrows Capital, Voyager, the list goes on and on and on. And the reason I want to frame this talk in a way that you'll see is going to be very, very different tone-wise in a second, is because it is incredibly dangerous in my eyes to let the events of last year cloud you from what's actually happening with digital assets and crypto, and also with the state of the world when it comes from a monetary perspective. Because what most people will do is look at the events of last year and dismiss digital assets. Look away and say they obviously failed. It was a failed experiment. It has been 12 years. It has been 15 years, depending on what asset you're talking about. And say, what do we have to show? When you walk around the streets and you talk to normal people, do they use Bitcoin right now? Most of them don't. When you go to traditional finance, do they use DeFi yet? Not quite. We've of course gone leaps and bounds, where I remember in 2020 when DeFi first started taking off, we had, I think, $2 million in total value locked in all of DeFi combined virtually. And since then, even now after this bear market, we're up to $50 billion being banked in decentralized finance. But what I really want to talk about today is that even though technologically it seems like we're still early, I think we're actually very, very close to the end game of what is happening with digital assets. And it's less so my belief, but rather it's all the governments of the world leaving a trail of breadcrumbs telling you that that is exactly what's been happening. Because it's, I think, a few places, it's as obvious as the United States, where you have regulators are cracking down on crypto harder than they ever have. Where, there's the old saying, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, and then they fight you, and then you win. But the really odd thing to think about is, why on earth would they even fight us in the first place? In one sentence, they will tell you that digital assets are a scam, they're not accomplishing anything, they are good for nothing. Yet in the next sentence, they will say that digital assets are a threat to national security. How on earth can you be a threat to national security, but also be, a useless bubble? It's a paradox. It's an oxymoron that tells you that there's a lot more going on. And ironically, in 2020, during COVID, when everything was shut down, I had a lot of time to think. I read a lot of books on game theory, and who in here knows the old game theory, model or story of the prisoner's dilemma? Prisoner's dilemma, okay, a couple people, right? So the prisoner's dilemma essentially tells a story of you and your buddy or you and your accomplice, are robbing a store, and you're getting caught. The cops take you to the station and they start interviewing you. Except they put you in two different rooms. And they ask you, you don't know what the other person's saying, and they ask you, if you confess, you're gonna get away scot-free, because we're gonna put the other guy in jail for 10 years. So if you confess, 0 years, the other guy confesses, he gets, if you confess, you get away free, the other guy goes to jail for 10 years. However, if you both confess, you both go away for 3 years. And of course, if you lie and say, we didn't do it, but your buddy tells them we actually did it, you're the one that goes away for 10 years. And so generally when you present this problem to people, their first instinct is, well, of course I would lie. Why would I tell the truth to the cops, right? But after running through all the scenarios, essentially, it becomes very clear that the only right answer is to confess. Why? Because you don't have control over what the other party does. And the worst case scenario, if you just run the numbers, is to go away for 10 years. And so ultimately, what everybody ends up doing is they confess because they don't have power over the other person. Now, why is it relevant for crypto? Because crypto, the whole world is essentially a simulation of I guess, consensus in a way, right? The whole world, like we're trying to find a way to get to decisions as quickly as possible, right? The only problem is that on a global level, as a species, we are virtually, what things do we agree on a global level? Who can name me one thing we agree on a global level as a species? I just want one thing. Is there anything that we agree on a global level? There's countries where slavery is still a thing. There's countries where landmines are still legal. There are countries where all kinds of crimes that exist in different corners of the world are still legal. And so the point I'm trying to get at is that no matter how utopian your mind might be, or dystopian, whatever angle you take, world governments will never coalesce to shut down crypto, because they failed to collaborate on virtually anything. Whether we talk about saving the environment, whether we talk about human rights violations, it's virtually impossible to get the whole world around the table and say yes to anything. And that brings us back to the prisoner's dilemma problem. If we can't get the whole world to agree to shut down crypto, somebody will allow it. Meaning somebody will confess and get 0 years, while whoever's trying to shut down crypto is getting 10 years. And what that then ultimately leads to is it just being a question of time until crypto is globally adopted. Why? We're seeing this in the United States right now. And the SEC is on a hunt. They just had an oversight hearing where the US Congress, where the House of Representatives, the Oversight Committee, was grilling the head of the Securities and Exchange Commission, where you have two parties, the Democrats and Republicans. Very quickly it became a partisan thing where the Democrats are saying, good job, crypto's been doing all this evil stuff. I'm glad, you're finally taking charge here, right? But on the other end, you have the Republicans that are saying, because of the pushback we're giving crypto, talent is going overseas, capital is going overseas, and we're losing our foothold as a tech center in the world, right? Silicon Valley for many years dominated globally, and now when you look around crypto, who wants to incorporate the United States? People are going to Hong Kong, for example, where it's very pro-crypto now, or Singapore or Dubai, to many other jurisdictions where there is support. And it's ironic because I think the United States is an amazing case study, because people can look at other countries that try to ban crypto in the past, let's say India, or there's many other countries where that happened, and you say, well, but it's not the world superpower. Well, okay, United States is competing along with China to be the world superpower, and yet it too faces the struggle. And so what you ultimately choose between then is, do you want to remain control domestically? Better word, do you want to maintain your power domestically, meaning Bitcoin versus dollar? Or do you want to maintain your power, your hegemony, internationally? You can try to keep power locally, but in the effort to do so, you will lose power internationally. And so ergo, all roads lead to Rome, where no matter how much a country will push back, no matter how long, they will ultimately unban digital assets. They will ultimately go back and try to embrace it, because that is the only path forward. And in the past few years, you've had India ban crypto, you've had China ban crypto, you have the United States getting very, very close to pushing against crypto. But ultimately, they always walk back because they recognize that you might try to remove crypto out of your country. You try to remove your country out of crypto, but you can't remove crypto out of your country. Meaning, you can say, we don't allow you to use crypto here, but crypto will still exist because it's code. It doesn't go anywhere. It's global. It exists everywhere, nowhere at the same time. This is actually the end game where global currencies are failing. The trust in the banking sector is broken, and we're not necessarily entering a physical war, but we're certainly entering a currency war. And the only neutral territory out there are digital assets. And so for that reason alone, I think is so important for anybody, no matter what their business is, what their industry is, what their walk of life is, to have some form of exposure to digital assets. and at the very minimum explore it and understand it and use it so that whether it's for your own personal finances or for your business's commerce, that you can easily transition. And also now, while you still can, have your own self-sovereign setup, because some countries around the world will try to throttle it, where they say you cannot have a non-KYC wallet. Today, anybody can still set up a wallet that is not KYC and you own it and you can put assets on there. That might not be a freedom that we have in different countries around the world in a couple of years.
Hi Felix, thank you for your sharing.
Thank you.
A question from my knowledge and experience. Investors can tap opportunities in the space.
How can investors take advantage? Well, I think the best way to be an expert in crypto, or the best way to make smart calls, is by being a super user, right? So that has always helped me in crypto to like see through the smoke, see through the fog, is to actually try things out. So for example, like during DeFi summer back in 2020, I would use anything before I invest in it. Terra Luna is the trade I've made most money on in my life. We bought it at 20 cents and we sold it at $85. Why did I sell it at $85? Because I actually understood how the system worked, right? Like it's important to understand, like, how does this thing work?
A huge hand of applause to Felix. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. What's up? So we just wrapped up our week here in Hong Kong. It's been a week full of meetings, talks, and so forth. Now for the final day, we're actually going to explore nature a little bit. We're out here on Dragon's Back, so come along and join us. I do this every day, usually. After my late night nap at 4 a.m, before my cold shower, do one quick walk up here, then quick ice bath, followed by an infrared sauna, followed by 3 hours of meditation, and then after I fast for 6 hours, I usually get my day started. But you keeps you young, keeps you young. Das Bild mal, dass ich ein Elite-Soldat bin für den Vlog. Nichts macht was aus. Wir rennen durch den Dschungel, traden Krypto. Schlafen tun wir nur 3 Stunden und sehen gut dabei aus. Wie in der Hölle ist dann immer noch Single.